Good morning, everybody. It is Friday. Happy Friday. And it's 10 o'clock. It's time for 10 with Tim. We are going verse by verse right now through the book of 2 Samuel. And we are in chapter 6, verses 12 to 23. This is good. This is really good. Isn't this good? And so yesterday we left the Ark of the Covenant in the garage at the house of a man named Obed-Edom. Remember, David and the people of Israel were trying to bring the ark back out. It had been captured for 20 years by the Philistines, now brought home, left in Abinadab's, barn. And so now, one more time, we're going to try to bring it home, right? Now, yesterday, as we were reading this first episode, when they tried to bring it home, they were not attentive. It seems like they were more into the celebration than they were mindful of the God they were celebrating, right? And so this time David is encouraged. God's been good to the house of Obed-Edom, and the ark has been there. So now David begins to realize that this can be done, but it can only be done with obedience, with reverence. And so this time, notice the difference. This time, David makes sure that the ark is moved in exactly the way that the Lord instructed Moses, right? I mean, this goes all the way back to Moses. And so I think you can read it. Was it 1 Chronicles chapter 15, around verse 15, 1 Chronicles 15, verses 11 to 15, right in there. You can read the details of exactly how David and the Levites moved the ark this time. But it is exactly as God had instructed. It doesn't matter about a new cart, none of that. Only the Levites can move the Ark of the Covenant. And the Ark of the Covenant is to be moved on their shoulders, carried with poles that slide through the rings on the side. So they're very detailed instructions for how this is to be done. So this time, notice how David does it with incredible attention to God's instructions. But on top of that, they stop and they make a sacrifice every 6 steps. Every 6 steps. So this time there is a celebration, but there is a celebration with sacrifice. Constant celebration and sacrifice so that the God that they are actually worshiping is always front and center. Gosh, there's so many messages, so many lessons for us about worship. I mean, it's celebration and it's sacrifice. But you can't become so focused on the celebration that you forget the God that you're celebrating. And this time, David gets it right. They're bringing the ark back in, carrying it exactly as it's supposed to be carried. And it's wonderful. It's a wonderful worship service. And David himself is dancing before the Lord with all of his might. I mean, just to be in the presence of his holiness with proper fear and obedience and celebration. David is a man on fire, a man overflowing with joy, a man who has absolutely forgotten himself in worship. I love that. I just love that. Because worship is about that, right? It's about celebration and sacrifice. It's about giving yourself, but also forgetting yourself. And that's what David does. He's just dancing, y'all. And he never stopped to ask himself, can I actually dance? Should I actually dance? What are people going to think? It never occurs to him to ask, what are people going to think? But it turns out people got thoughts. Well, not a lot of people, mainly just one person, his wife, Michal. This is interesting, really. Now, the text makes sure to remind you that Michal, verse 16, is the daughter of Saul, like you're going to forget that. But Michal is the daughter of Saul. If you remember way back in 1 Samuel, Michal loved David so much that it scared Saul. We talked about this a couple of days ago when David had Michal brought back to him. I don't know. If she once had a heart that was soft and affectionate toward David, there's no sign of that anymore. So I don't know if Michal's objection to David's worship here is completely spontaneous based on what she says is just the embarrassment of his dancing before the maidens of Israel. I don't know. something tells me it goes back a lot further than that. Something about this reminds me of when her second husband, what was his name, Paltiel, when he was walking and weeping. I mean, I don't know. But all I know is when she looks out the window and she sees King David, her husband, dancing before the Lord, it enrages her. She's filled with contempt. She hates him. She hates the very sight of him. As I say, I really can't fully explain the way her heart is turned against David and also against the Lord. I mean, where's the joy? Where's the joy for seeing the Ark of the Covenant, brought back, and people worshiping once more gladly and freely in the presence of God? Like, where's her joy? There's probably a 1,000 sermons to preach right here, because have you ever been, Michael? Have you ever been that person in a worship service where people are obviously in the presence of God and they're worshiping, but you don't like it? You ever been that person, that worship critic? Again, it's just one of those moments when you need to check your heart. And I have been in those situations. I've been in moments of worship, and I'm about to preach, but I've been in moments of worship where my heart's just cold, and I look around and maybe I don't like the song, or maybe I don't like something. And all of a sudden it becomes about me and what I like and don't like. And understand in that moment when God is being worshiped, but my heart's not in it, that says more about my heart than the worship service around me, always. Because when the Lord's name is lifted up, God's people love to see his name lifted up. It doesn't matter in what language. It doesn't matter with what style of music. I mean, God's people just love to see God's, name lifted up. And they love to see people, just enraptured in his presence. And when you're in that situation where people are being moved to worship the Lord, but you're not moved, again, that says something more about your heart than it says about the service or the hearts of those around you. There's something about the heart of Michael here. I can't explain it, but it is hard and it is cold. And when David comes home, that's the only thing she can think about. Well, I hope you're proud of yourself. The way you're out there dancing, your dress was flying up and all the girls, they saw your, your whitey tighties and I hope you're really pleased with yourself, King David. I mean, my goodness, what is wrong with this woman? What's happened to Michael? But I love this. I love so much in verse 21 when David says, she's saying, I didn't particularly like your dancing. And David says, honey, I wasn't dancing for you. Go David. I love that. I wasn't dancing for you. I wasn't dancing for you. David retorted to Michael, I was dancing before the Lord, who, by the way, chose me above you and your family. I mean, David, that's kind of cold. I don't know if he needed to say that, but probably it needs to be said. I wasn't dancing for you. I was dancing before the Lord who put me in this place of favor, the Lord who's conquered all of my enemies, the Lord in whose presence we gathered today and worship with abandon and joy. I wasn't dancing for you. Gosh, I love that so much. I wasn't dancing for you. Yes, I am willing to look even more foolish than this. So again, this is David saying, honey, if you didn't like what you saw today, you're going to hate the rest of your life with me because I'm about to get even more crazy than that. I mean, if you don't like the sight of a man worshiping, you're about to be one miserable girl because this man's going to worship. I mean, David, I love that. I just love that. Again, in worship, you give yourself, you forget yourself, and you can't look around to see what other people think about it. I mean, I'm all about trying to make my wife happy, but my heart belongs to the Lord first. And this is David, honey. If you didn't like what you saw today, you're going to be one miserable girl because there's going to be a whole lot more where that came from. If you thought today I look foolish, you hadn't seen anything yet, David's going to continue to worship God like a man on fire. And the scripture goes on to say, so Michal, the daughter of Saul, in case you forgot, the daughter of Saul, she remained childless throughout her entire life. There's a kind of judgment here. Now, every time a woman is childless, that does not mean she's being punished by God. Let me say that loud and with feeling. Every time a woman is childless, it doesn't mean she's being punished by God. But in this case, it does. Because understand, it says it multiple times. She's the daughter of Saul. She's the daughter of Saul, which means an offspring between David and Michal. That would be something really special. That would be bringing together the dynasty of King Saul and the dynasty of King David. And there are probably good political reasons why you would want to have that crown prince. You know, the crown prince, the son of Saul and the son of David, who could be the future king of Israel. But that's not God's plan. Saul sinned. Saul rejected the Lord. Saul refused to obey. And so for that reason, he's been cut off. Not one of his offspring will ever take the throne of Israel. And so for that reason, and that reason alone is the important reason, Michal's not going to have any children. Again, a son of Michal would be a crown prince for David's throne, and no son of Saul is ever going to sit on the throne of David. Yeah. Oh gosh, isn't that good? Tomorrow, actually Monday, 2 Samuel chapter 7, verses 1 to 17. Pick up right there. 2 Samuel chapter 7, verses 1 to 17. It's been a good week, and Monday is going to start a good week as well. So I will see you then at 10 o'clock, Lord willing, for 10 with Tim. Listen, have a great weekend. Stay in the Word and stay with me. I'll see you on Monday. I love you guys so much. Have a good week.